the process, I still felt like there was something missing for me. I got a lot of answers for my own self, and then after doing the training, I actually went out to California where she was having a workshop and went through the workshop personally for myself. And so I got the codependence part and how it's set up in childhood. But there still felt like there was a missing for me. And I couldn't put really the words to it. And then she came out with the book, Facing Love Addiction. And, you know, it says, giving yourself the power to change the way you love. When I read Facing Love Addiction, that's the piece that was missing for me. Now, there are people who are codependent or have that codependency with other people and that really don't have the ingrained love addiction. Not everyone has that. You know, I was blessed or cursed with it, whatever you want to say. But when I read Pia's book, and then Pia and I traveled some together, and so we were traveling a little bit when this book came out, and so I could talk with her, and it hit the nail on the head. And so what love addicts do, what love addiction is, and how it gets set up is through childhood, any forms of abandonment. And, you know, it may not be, your parents may not leave you, they may not physically walk off and leave you, but there's a lot of different forms of abandonment. And for me, that deep, deep abandonment for me was that my mother was severe drug addict and alcoholic, and I became her caretaker at an early age. And then my dad on the other side was a rager, and he was violent, and he was gone a lot. And so when a child starts to be a caretaker, a caregiver of a parent, it puts them in a situation and a position that they don't have. Their brain is not mature enough to really do that. I could do the things, but I didn't have the brain capacity as an adult to really make sound decisions, and I had to make a lot of decisions. But what happened within that is I became absolutely addicted to my mother. I lived in total fear that she would die because she told me every day, if you leave me, I'll die. So that was kind of a validation of my thinking. She didn't have a mother, and I could tell her story as an orphan more than I could tell my own story. And I almost stepped into her skin. I remember going to a church. I was thinking about this morning, thinking about going to a church. I was always taking myself to a church, and I was a young teenager at this point. And I went to this church, and I was so bashful and so nervous, but the miracle of it is I took myself to church because I felt like I needed to go to church. But anyway, I remember going in and introducing myself by my mother's name. Now that might be a little bit of codependency. I introduced myself as Neva Johnson instead of Teeny Johnson. My whole identity was about my mother. And like I said, I became obsessed with my mother, and it lasted really until my early 30s. And my job and my joy was taking care of her. I loved her. I loved her until the day she died. And she was hateful, and she was mean, and she never got any better. But I just loved her. She was, like I said, like my child. And so it was that abandonment, that total abandonment as a child that set me up, I know, to be a love addict. And you've heard me say that I would never marry an alcoholic, and I didn't. I married me two of them because that's what love addicts do is, love addicts, and I'll speak for myself, and You know, Pia's book, she uses a lot of personal illustrations in her both books, but particularly in Love Addiction book. She uses a lot of her own personal illustrations, and I know her, and she could write some more chapters in there, but that's her story. I won't tell you what those chapters need to be, but anyway, our journey just keeps going as long as we live. But anyway, that love addiction is, uh, you know, things were not tolerable. I mean, they were awful in my home. So I began to read. I could read. I read everything I got my hands on. And so Mother would get these old romance novels. I mean, not novels. I don't even know if they make these. They were magazines. She'd have me go get them. And it was True Romance or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if they even make them anymore. But I'd read them from page to page. Those romance magazines, those stories. And every one of them had a happy ending. And so I began to live in a fantasy that I was going to find someone that was going to rescue me, and we were going to live happily ever after. And so, that feeling of being abandoned was set up early. And so what love addicts do, and this is all not on a conscious level, what love addicts do is we get so excited and we go out to find someone that they are going to be our knight in shining armor. And what we go toward is people that are not available. They're not available. And then, as love addicts, we think, that's no challenge to a love addict. No challenge at all. I can change it. And I remember when my second husband, we didn't hardly date, but anyway, nevertheless, he didn't look real good. He didn't dress very nice. He wore short pants and white socks and his shirt tail out and all of that. But in my teenage, and I was a teenager, but in my teenage brain, I thought, that's all right. I can change it. And I was already dressing him, buying his clothes before we ever got married. And so the project, he was my project, and I was on it to make him what I wanted him to be so I could be comfortable and feel loved. Well, he never got the memo. He could not get what I needed or wanted, and so he, would resist, most of the change. And so, love addicts, like I said, if you haven't received that deep connection to parents as a child, that bonding as a child, I describe it as having this umbilical cord out and going around trying to find someone to connect with. Will you love me? Will you love me? Will you love me? We just are looking for love, like the old song, looking for love in all the wrong places. And I did that. And so we go toward people that's familiar. For those of you that are married, I recommend anyone, if they're in a relationship, thinking about getting married, thinking about getting divorced, thinking if you're engaged, whatever, I would recommend that you go do an Imago therapy weekend. It is the best marriage counseling that there is. And it was developed partly by, Dr. Harville Hendricks wrote the book, Getting the Love You Want. But he was helped by Pia Melody and my friend in Dallas, Dr. Ann Worth, and then my friend in Austin, Dr. Love, Pat Love. So those three women helped Dr. Harville Hendricks put together that Imago therapy from the woman's side, and then he could, he could get married, but he couldn't stay married, and he could, Dr. Hendricks could not figure out why he could not be in a relationship. And what they figured out, with these, him working with these female, women friends, is that, avoidance addicts is the opposite of a love addict. An avoidance addict is usually what happens to an avoidance addict is they are enmeshed. It's usually a young man, and he's enmeshed with his mother. She engulfs him, takes him hostage, and so he has that fear of intimacy with women. Now, he may love sex, he may be a sex addict, and usually most of your avoidance addicts have some kind of an addiction. And it's usually alcoholism, drug addiction, you name it. Work addiction. A lot of your avoidance addicts are work addicts. And this can be men or women, but basically a lot of times the woman falls into that love addict category, and the man in the avoidant, and the people that I've worked with. And so my goal is therapy is helping each partner, helping the other one heal the inner child. And you have to be pretty healthy to be able to set boundaries and do that particular workshop. And if you can't go through that successfully, you probably don't need to be in the marriage, and that's what it'll tell you. But anyway, it's a wonderful process, and I don't know how I got off on that. But anyway, for people that come together that are love addicts and avoidance addicts, and they clash, the first thing to do, a lot of your love addicts are going to have some form of addiction. What happens with love addicts more than anything are eating disorders with your love addicts. And we see it a lot. And, they have that empty hole in the soul from that abandonment in childhood. And if they come from a family of addicts and they have that brain chemistry, once they start using food in any way, it fills up that hole in the soul. That there is nothing more intimate for any of us than to take in food to our body. That's intimacy, taking in something into our body to make ourselves feel better. So that's really, for love addicts, the food can be a real substitution. And then, on the flip of that, taking in massive amounts of food, the anorexic, and I can't give this a blanket coverage, but many of your anorexics fall under that avoidance category, not love addicts. They fall under the avoidance, whether men or women. They live a lot of times from the neck up and try to ignore what's going on below, from here down. And many of them avoid intimacy. They avoid getting close to anyone. And if they get too close, that eating disorder will come up as a block in that heartbeat. And so when working with eating disorder clients, and your bulimics, your majority of the bulimics, and I am a recovered one, I can talk about this, the majority of us, not all, but majority of us, we are severe love addicts. We just want somebody to love us, love us, love us, love us, and then when they don't, we use massive amounts of food to fill up that hole in our soul, and then that rage and that anger comes up. Well, my parents wasn't there for me, and now he's not there for me, and so that rage comes up. And we get over that porcelain throne and we throw up that food. And what we get addicted to as bulimics is the release of the food. That sense of ease and comfort. And it lasts about that long, a second. And then we look around at the mess we've made and the money that we've spent and all of that. But many of your I'm not giving a blanket coverage here, but many of your bulimics are love addicts. But majority of your compulsive overeaters are love addicts. Many of your anorexics are can fall in that avoidance category because they have a fear of intimacy. They don't want people to get close to them. Now, an avoidance addict is a lot of times will be your sex addict, or they'll have some addiction. I've never seen it happen. Of course, the business that I'm in, I probably wouldn't see it otherwise. But an avoidance addict is very seductive, whether it's a man or a woman, and they can draw people to them. And they're just so charming and so wonderful, and they just want you to come close to them and invite you in. And of course, a love addict usually picks out the avoidance addict. If there was 10 men in the room and there was one avoidance addict in that 10, and there was a love addict there, she'd pick him out in a heartbeat. It's like we go together, just soon like that. And so, when a love addict, they're just so excited that this avoidance addict is interested in them, and they get just so excited, and they go toward that avoidance addict, and when that happens, it scares the avoidance addict to death, because their childhood issues come up, and it reminds them of their mother, that enmeshment, and a lot of times, and I see it over and over and over and over and over, and it can be, a small amount, it can be a huge amount from this enmeshment from the mother. And what you see in there is there is relationship problems between the mother and father. And so the dad is, the husband is not there for his wife. So the mother will go down to the son. She may have 14 daughters and one son, but that son's going to be the golden child, and will hardly, I don't know, I'm exaggerating, y'all know I'm exaggerating. And if she has more than one son, there's usually one that she will go toward, that she engulfs. She will just bring them in close and just love them. And a child's, their first impulse is to push away. Most children don't like that. They may let you hug them for a minute, but then they'll push down. But a true love addict that's enmeshing, and taking, just over loving a son. And it can be reversed, it can be a father over loving the daughter. We see it more the other way. So this mother just, absolutely engulfs the son. And he makes up in his brain that love hurts. Love hurts. He's not going to let anybody get real close to him at all. He'll let them get close, but just so close. Because a lot of times, not every time, but many times, your avoidance addict is going to be your sex addict. And they may have other addictions, coupled with that. They'll have some form of addiction. You can almost take that to the bank, because they'll do something that creates that back walking away. When you get too close to an avoidance addict, they will turn around and walk away. Now, the love addict, let's go back to the love addict that has been raised in addiction, where maybe both parents turn their back on the child. Not intentionally, but in their own sickness, on their own addictions. So the love addict has had that, back walking away. So when they get in a relationship, a love addict in a relationship with an avoidance addict, a love addict is not satisfied until that avoidance addict turns their back to them. They almost make them walk away, They will create chaos, that love addict will, to make that avoidance addict just, I mean, an avoidance addict, a sex addict's not going to stay in that hollering and screaming and chasing and all that. They will turn around and walk away. The minute that avoidance addict turns around, it really charges up the love addict because it reminds her of the way she grew up. She gets addicted to the back walking away. That's what she's used to. She tried to conquer mom and dad and try to get their attention, and that didn't work. And so it's carried over into their coupleship. And until one or both of them get sick enough, we just say, hurry up and get sick as a dog in your addiction, at least one of you. So if one, and it's usually the one that goes for help first, what we see is a lot of times if the avoidance addict is alcoholic or drug addict, they'll do an intervention on him, get him in treatment, not do anything about the wife. We've had people come here that went to some high dollar treatment centers. They never once addressed the family, let alone the coupleship. And that is dangerous in relationships where there's any addiction. So anyway, let's say, usually it's the love addict will seek help first, usually through counseling, to learn how to get him, to really do what she wants him to do. She doesn't really go for herself. She a lot of times goes to give me some ideas of how I can keep him close to me. And so that when an addict gets really sick in their addiction, hopefully somebody will do, whether it's an eating disorder or alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever. Let's keep it simple. Let's say it's a man, he's alcoholic. The family does an intervention on him. He goes off to treatment. They uncover, if it's a good treatment center, they'll also uncover that, perhaps he's a sex addict, and so they'll start treating him for his sex addiction. And a lot of treatment centers won't do this. This is why you have to be aware and really know where you're going or where you're sending loved ones, because a lot of treatment centers don't do that. But some of us do. And so if they treat him for both the alcoholism and the avoidance or the sex addiction, and he'll probably stay there 6 months or so if it's a really good treatment center, because it's going to take that long. Of course they'll say, oh, you just want our money and all that. But anyway, if he's lucky enough to get some time and can get into some good recovery, and what recovery looks like is to stand tall, autonomous by ourselves with God. That's what healthy recovery looks like, is to be able to stand tall, autonomous with the God of our understanding. Until we do that, we are not fit to be in a relationship. Now hear me, because we're not going in there to give anyone anything. We're going in there to get something. The sex addict goes in there to get that physical sexual acting out, and it may be on an unconscious level, but majority of your avoidance addicts are not available emotionally or spiritually. So this man is in good recovery, and he comes back, and his wife has not changed. She has not had any recovery. And so when he comes back and he starts treating his addiction, goes to AA, doesn't drink, treats his sex addiction, goes to SLA, he gets better. And what happens? She gets worse. She will break down in every kind of stress, illness that you can think of, stomach problems, nerve problems, arthritis problems. Her body will begin to break down if she doesn't get some help herself. And keep in mind, the love addict could be suffering from her own eating disorder. And so here she is, all she wanted was for him to get better, and he is. And he's not, if he's healthy, he is not going to participate in this love, this sick love and avoidant addict behavior. Because when the love addict, what she does, she goes over here and she finds some dependent person to be there for her that is a love avoidant, and he cannot be there. And so he goes toward her for sex, and she goes toward him for security, and it forms this dependency. They lean on each other till they can suck each other dry. I mean, they'll suck each other dry. But to keep in mind, the alcoholic got really sick first, and he went out and he's in good recovery. And if this one doesn't get into her own recovery, she'll do everything she can to get him back over here. Because this is the status quo. This is what she knows. This is what she experienced in her own childhood. And this, as uncomfortable as it is, it's comfortable. And so if this one will stand firm in their recovery and just love this other person and get them in treatment and get them help, then you're going to have two people standing tall, autonomous in their own recovery. And there has not been a coupleship up till then. They may be married, but there's no coupleship. Have y'all got it? What's between them is the addiction, is the love addiction, the love addict trying to get, and the avoidant addict running from him. So when you get two healthy people standing tall, autonomous, the relationship is a third entity. And you've got to begin to step into the relationship. And that takes work, because you're going to be what drew you to each other. If you recover, that's not going to be there. And you're going to have to really get to know each other and find out, who each other really is. And if you really love each other. We're really big around here, I am. Unless people are beating each other up, unless there is physical abuse, what I say is stay in that relationship and become different. Give it at least a year and become different. Practice with the partner that brought you to the dance. If you don't learn that dance with that partner, you're going to go and recreate the same scenario if you get outside of that relationship. So practice with that other person. Like if you're both healthy, clean in your addiction, and what we recommend both of you be in a 12-step program, because if this one over here, this alcoholic addict, is in recovery and this one isn't, she's going to get jealous of all those phone calls. She's going to get jealous of all those AA meetings. She's going to be jealous if she goes to a meeting with you. She's going to be jealous of every woman there that comes up. And I'm so glad to see. It's going to kill her watching you have fun in life without her. So that's why it's essential that both get help if you want a healthy coupleship. And then you begin to step into the coupleship. And then when you do that, that's sacred. That relationship that coupleship is sacred. And the key is to not let anyone or anything come between those two people in that coupleship. Now, if you have kids, of course you're going to have to open up a little bit, let those kids come in, and then get them out. They move in and move out, and Jackie knows that. She's got them all out of her nest. That's what health is. You you put your focus on those children when they need you, but the main focus needs to be on each other in that coupleship. And even when those kids are grown and those grandkids, those kids need to be over there, and your coupleship is the most important. And that's what your generations are going to look at. That's what your grown children are going to see, that your coupleship is much more important than they are, or the grandkids. Love your grandkids. I love mine. I spent a weekend with them this past weekend. But R.L. and I did enough work, thank you God, on our relationship that we knew that we had to come together and spend time with each other instead of spreading ourselves so thin. You know, we call it finding exits in the marriage. You know, when a relationship is in trouble, people look for exits. They look for ways to get out of that coupleship, and that's through addictions. That's through letting your children take precedence over your spouse. That can be your job. That can be, you name it. It can be anything, anything. Now, if you're single and you're not in a relationship, you become what you want to be. You know, you become the healthy person that you want to be, whether you ever choose to be in a relationship or not. And when you do, when you become healthy, you know, before recovery, you know, you might have picked some husbands or wives that wasn't healthy. Maybe you picked 2 or 3 of them. I don't know. Maybe your pickers broke and you went to unhealthy people. And so now you're single. And so what we say is, don't rush into a relationship early in recovery. Get to know yourself and, you know, and learn to love yourself. Just like if you're in a coupleship, do not get a divorce unless somebody's beating somebody else up. Stay in there and learn from each other, you know. And, you know, and where a healthy relationship is, it ebbs and flows, goes back and forth and back and forth. You stand with each other. You stand with each other and you back each other up. So, if y'all have been here, I'm sure you've heard all of this. Maybe this is just a refresher course for you. But love addiction can be deadly. And when you team up, and I will tell you, a love addict, if they find a normie, accidentally find a normal person to start dating, this is what they say: oh my God, he is the most boring person I have ever seen. They will be bored out of their gourd, you know, and then if he comes toward her and tries to, you know, compliment her, or even, I mean, heaven forbid, you know, hug her or touch her, as much as she thinks she wants that, she becomes the back walking away because she has that fear of intimacy. So she'll turn around and run away. I mean, this still works both ways, you know. So it is that dance of addiction. But there is hope in recovery, but it's got to start with each individual. Because if you're not healthy individually, you have nothing to bring to the table. But as people recover, if you're single and you're not in a relationship, as you recover, what I make up and what I believe wholeheartedly, that when and if you do get in a relationship, you're going to pick healthier people than you picked before, because health seeks its own level. Sickness seeks its own level. Healthy people do not want to be around sick-ass people. Do y'all know that? They don't. I mean, they do not want to be around sick people. And, you know, the other way around. You know, they do, you know, and so when you get healthy, and this is why I love for couples to do their work, their individual work, and then their coupleship work. Because you can recover individually till hell freezes over and be like 2 individual countries living in the same house. You know, you might be healthy, but if you don't do that coupleship work, your coupleship's not going to change just because you're both healthier, because you'll go your separate ways and you'll find either other people or other things to, you know, get interested in. But if you're in a coupleship and you really love each other, and I say if there is that much love or compassion left, you can tell I'm a romantic, but anyway, if there's just a little bit of love left in a relationship, build on that. And you can always get a divorce. That's, you know, And practice with the one that brought you to the dance and get that dance down. And when you do, you might decide to stay together until you're old and gray. Who knows? Who knows? And there's nothing any more beautiful than to watch a happy relationship, coupleship. I had the opportunity to speak down at a church in Houston, and the pastor of the church, I call him Uncle Jim because he's Misty's uncle, and then her aunt is Aunt Nancy, and then she has another aunt and uncle, and we spent several meals together. And I'm a people watcher. I love to watch people. I don't know what goes on in their house. I don't, but I watch them through that weekend. And those two couples, they know how to have a coupleship. And I could see the love, but I could see also the interdependence, how they could, they didn't have to just stay hooked to each other. They could, go over and visit and, with other people and all. They wasn't just clinging to each other, but you could feel that connection and that love between those couples. I need to tell them that. I don't know, maybe they need to hear that. But they demonstrate really what I'm sorry to say preaching, but anyway, what I'm sharing. And I suspect that didn't come easy. I suspect, because I know some of all of their stories, particularly Uncle Jim and Aunt Nancy. That's all I can call them. I can't call them that anyway. I've heard both of their stories, and they worked on that coupleship, and now it shows. And I believe they have a lot to offer, other people. So I didn't mean to include all of that, and I'll call Jim and Nancy and tell them that I've, used their names here, and thank them for letting me without them knowing it. But anyway. Love addiction is set up through abandonment. Love avoidance is through enmeshment. And so the bottom line is, until we can love ourselves and allow God to love us, we have nothing to take to another person. We go in there to get something. All righty, that's what I have. What do y'all have? Y'all join me. Gina, what do you just